This is Associate Dean Chris Jenkins. I'm a violist and Associate Dean at Oberlin, working with students there, but I'm actually here to talk about our new Stage Left presentation, dealing with the works of African-American composers, and actually quite a few composers who are very deeply connected to Oberlin. I have two awesome performers here with me, Dianna White-Gould and Matt Jones. And they can talk a little bit about themselves, but we're really excited to be here to present a program of works by Black composers, especially at this period in history. So Dianna and Matt, I'm not sure if you'd like to go ahead and talk about your backgrounds, maybe where you went to school, your connections to Cleveland also.
So I was born here in Cleveland and to a family of professional musicians. You could say music is kind of in our blood and it's a tradition in our family. I grew up with full family support, grand piano to practice on at home. And, you know, my parents got us the best teachers. My dad has the distinction of being one of the first Black musicians in a major symphony orchestra, the Cleveland Orchestra, and the longest serving member. He was in that orchestra for 39 years, from 1957 to 1996. My mother's still living. She's a pianist and composer, and we call her the visionary matriarch of our family. She's the person, she's kind of the engine that helps everything run. But I attended and graduated from Oberlin Conservatory. I was a piano and music education major. I went on and I got a master's degree here in Cleveland, and I have traveled performing solo and collaboratively. I've traveled to Europe to do that, and I've done it here in the Cleveland area and in the United States. I was the accompanist for the Cleveland Orchestra Children's Chorus for about 24 years. As an educator, I am the vocal director at Dyke School of the Arts, and I am a new instructor at Tri-C in their vocal mastery program. So I guess that's a little bit about me. I live in Shaker Heights with my husband, who's a musician as well, and we have one cat.
Cool. And Matt, would you like to say a bit about yourself, where you're from, your introduction to Cleveland, and anything else you think that might be of interest to the audience?
Sure. I'm from Savannah, Georgia. I came to Cleveland and did music education and voice performance at Cleveland State, and I've taught in Cleveland Public Schools, and now I'm teaching voice at Cleveland Music Settlement, the Center for Music.
Yeah, and we're actually all faculty, all three of us are faculty at the Music Settlement, which is how we actually first initially met, I think, back in the fall, right, of 2019, the before time, otherwise known as. So, thanks for doing that. I really wanted to ask you about this program, because I know that I have things to say about the works for viola and piano that we programmed, but I was curious what your thoughts are on why you wanted to select these works for voice and piano. Dianna, also the work
for well, these selections highlight Black and African Americans in classical music. We have I've worked with Dr. Leslie Adams and Mrs. Dolores White, composers who live here in Cleveland and who also, I think, attended Oberlin at the same time.
They did.
And Cleveland Institute of Music at the same time, I think. We also have Hale Smith, who also studied at CIM and lives here in Cleveland, and George Walker, who studied at Oberlin as well. And just spiritual arrangements, which is very significant right now with the Black Lives Matter movement and this, I guess, new interest in African American composers. So I thought to do some unique pieces, also art songs by Leslie Adams and Dolores White of Langston Hughes settings. One of his jazz poems, his first, written here in Cleveland, When Sue Wears Red, Calypso style, and Leslie Adams' Homesick Blues from his song group, Wider View. Homesick Blues, one of Langston Hughes's blues poems. We know Weary Blues, I think, is the most famous.
Yeah, and you know, I think what you had to say about this moment in time being important for these composers. I mean, we can't really open up the New York Times online and not find a new article every day about the importance of Black composers.
Yeah, I wanted to say that a lot of the composers, I think about, first of all, just the music. So much of the accompaniments are really fiendishly difficult. I mean, they're but so satisfying, and the music is just beautiful music. And a lot of these composers, I actually grew up around these musicians as family friends, like Francis Walker, Leslie Adams. There's a pianist named Natalie Hinderis, who was one of my idols and one of my mother's idols. And these were also friends and associates and colleagues of my parents. So it's really interesting to get to know them as an adult, and having them around and being able to actually talk to them and call them up and ask them about tempos. So, but it's just, I think the music that we selected, really great gems. I kind of look at them, you know, they're just, they should be heard, and they're all just wonderful pieces of music.
But what you just described is actually so awesome, because it sounds like, I mean, I hear like this Black classical music salon kind of environment almost existing, right? Where people are meeting and talking, and you know, there's just all kinds of cross-pollination going on. And I think no one really is aware that Cleveland is and has been a place like that for Black musicians. I definitely was not aware.
Yeah.
I've become dimly aware just thinking about the fact that people like Hale Smith were going to school here, that your dad was here. And you know, my own teacher, Lynn Ramsey of the Cleveland Orchestra, I just mentioned, you know, we were playing together, and she knows you, and she knew your dad, and said,
Right.
"Oh, yeah, he was an icon." Well, you know, I was excited to program the Perkinson that's on this program, partly because it's not played very often, but also the Adams, in part because we got to play it for Leslie Adams earlier this year. And it was really a great experience.
Yeah. It was.
As a performer, you know, we always enjoy getting to do that.
Yeah.
It was just great to hear his reflections on certain parts, especially things that are not so clear. I think stylistically, I would go so far as to say that there are some aesthetically Black elements of the piece that are not able to be communicated particularly well through the notation that we have. Where I kind of wondered, is this supposed to be like this? Is it like that? And he was like, no, it's this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about the meaning also of legacy for us, because one of the themes of this program is the idea of linking legacies, because we have this connection to Cleveland through the composers, and also just through the fact that so many Black artists and musicians have been nurtured at places like Oberlin in particular, and CIM. So I was just kind of curious, you know, thinking about our own linkages to the former generations of Black musicians. What does it mean to us as performers to be connected to them? Can it be said that we owe something to them for the trails they blazed? Are there important lessons that they have for us?
Yeah, I think that That's sort of a hard question for me, because I feel like I'm just almost by osmosis, I'm kind of just living that life and doing those things. But I do think we do bear a responsibility to educate people about this music. I think we're specially positioned to perform it and talk about it and talk about the people who are the composers. And, I think that's our special job that I think really only, we can do as we're learning the music and talking with the composers. And so, yeah, I think we do bear that responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think what we owe is this concert that introduces different pieces. It's all by African-American composers. We were going to do a different piece and decided to just keep it all African-American composers. So I think concerts and things like this, where going forward, we don't hear the same pieces we've heard over and over again. I think we're all highlighting something different and performing something that maybe is not heard. And so I think this is the way going forward, or would be the way to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
And, I know that a lot of schools are, just to be totally real, there are many schools that are making commitments now to put a certain percentage of works by Black composers on the program next year. I know I have my own thoughts on that. I'm curious what you all think about those kinds of initiatives.
Well, I mean, I think it's in one way, it's such a good time to, for Black musicians to get work, and it's exciting to have that. But I think that that has to be more of a willing commitment to really enjoying it and understanding it, and like a fuller commitment, not just we're gonna do this. So I would be willing to see more willingness and more understanding and more just more inclusiveness in general.
My thought would be that you would study African-American culture now a little more in depth. Like we study, let's say if you're doing Brahms or Schubert, you need to know a little more about the culture. And that's something I'm hoping to see with the new interest in programming African-American composers and maybe musicians.
So, getting a little bit into Black Lives Matter and what that means for us and for people like us, classical musicians. A lot of the recent protests have actually involved musicians, and there have been performances at protests. There have been some articles in the news about protests by musicians, by Black musicians. So I'm curious what your all feelings are about the intersection of Black Lives Matter and classical music particularly, and more generally music. Do musicians have a role to play at these protests? Do classical musicians have a role to play at these protests? Do we have other roles to play that could be as important?
I think it's a good time for people to be able to express how they're feeling. As I think for me and people in my generation and my father's generation before me, for so long, you dealt with things and you just internalized them. You didn't really talk about them. And now's a good time to talk about things and express yourself. And I think that's great. I really think that's great. But my role, I think, is to stick with the music and just continue performing the music and letting people know that the music exists and just letting them hear it, at my job as an artist.
I agree. Well, I guess art has always been political. We've seen, I was reading recently of protests that happened at recitals by Paul Robeson in the 30s around similar issues. It was color issues. So I think performing and programming again African-American composers and their works and performing them with integrity is our way.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
Yeah.
When I was first at Oberlin, I mean, growing up, I was always the only Black person, you know, in this piano studio or, you know, in the recitals that we had and everything. And then so when I got to Oberlin, even though, you know, my parents had friends of all different races, but when I got to Oberlin and I saw other Black musicians, it was very, very, I can't even explain it. It was just a fantastic thing to see other people that were doing the same things that I was doing. And a lot of I don't keep in touch with pretty much most people from high school, but Oberlin, I have very, very close friends that I keep in touch with to this day. So
yeah, I mean, you know, I'm hopeful. All we can do is keep on trying to do good things. So thank you guys so much for making the time to do this. It's really awesome, and I'm really glad that we can do this, and I really hope we get to do a lot more of it.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Well, you guys are welcome very much.
When Susanna Jones wears red, her face is like an ancient cameo. When Susanna Jones wears red, her face is like an ancient cameo. Turned down by the roses, under the blast of trumpet, Jesus. When Susanna Jones wears red, her face is like an ancient cameo. When Susanna Jones wears red, her face is like an ancient cameo. Turned down by the roses, come to the blast of trumpets, Jesus. When Susanna Jones wears red, a queen from some dead Egyptian night. When Susanna Jones wears red, a queen from some dead Egyptian night walks once again. Blow trumpets, Jesus.
I'm so happy to be here with the composer, Leslie Adams. Mr. Adams is a graduate of Oberlin Conservatory, an amazing composer, well known particularly as a composer of art songs. His works have been performed by the Buffalo, Indianapolis, and Cleveland Symphonies, among others. So thank you so much for being here. It's really great to have you.
My pleasure. Good to be here.
So I really wanted to talk about some of your background and your upbringing in particular, because you are a native of Cleveland and because you attended Oberlin. So I'd just love to get a little bit of information about your background, where you're from, where you were born and raised, and what it was like growing up in Cleveland at that time.
Well, actually, I will say that I'm probably unique in that I had a marvelous childhood, wonderful parents, and almost no complaints. They were great. My mother was a crossing guard for the schools, and my dad was a civil service worker, and they started me off on piano at the age of 4. That was their idea, and I just thought it was, that all the kids were, doing that, what I was doing. And they started me with Dorothy Smith, who was a violinist in the Women's Symphony Orchestra. She 2 doors from where we lived, and she started me with my piano. And then after Smith, I went to Mina Eichenbaum, who was 3 streets over, and she continued with me. And that was about when I was in elementary school. I was studying piano. I had a book, Little Bach Preludes, very simple, and then Mozart. And I also was in the junior choir at Antioch Baptist Church, and the repertoire was excellent. The anthems we sang were standard classic anthems, wonderful anthems. And we went to concerts, and what can I say? It was idyllic, really. The Met Opera came to the public hall once a year on tour, and when I was in junior high school, I started going to the opera, and I saw Butterfly, saw La Bohème, La Traviata, Il Trovatore. I saw Lohengrin with Lotus Melchior and Helen Traubel, Carmen with Risa Stevens. There was Lawrence Tibbett. There was Bido Soyao, Lily Pons in Lakme. It was just a marvelous experience. And hey, that was my background. That was my childhood. When I went to junior high school, the teacher there had me to play for some of the music classes. And when I went to high school, I started studying voice with the teacher who was the choral director at Glenville, John Howard Tucker, who was an Oberlin graduate. So he kept telling me I had to go to Oberlin. That's all I ever heard. So when it came time for me to choose a college, guess what I chose? And he had me sing with the choir there in Oberlin, and I did a lot of solo work. I did some concert work, and it was interesting when I first went to Oberlin for my audition. It was in the middle of the semester, of Oberlin semester. It was in January. I graduated, and then the next week, I was going to Oberlin, in the middle of the year. and everybody was asking me, what was I doing there? It's the middle of the year. You know, my dad's rationale was that he was working at the draft board, volunteer draft board, and they were taking young men for the draft. It's a Korean, some war anyway. And so I started in at Oberlin in the middle of the semester, and as a voice student under music education. That was the one thing they decided. I needed to either go for music education, or he wanted me to be a doctor. One or the other. He gave me the choice. I chose to be a musician, and so I studied with Robert Fountain, sang in his choir, the Oberlin Concert Choir, for 4 years, and studied voice privately with him. 50-minute lessons, two 50-minute lessons every week for 4 years, Robert Fountain.
Wow.
And so it was a very fine experience. We went through all the baritone arias, the bass arias, the operatic arias, and then I also sang in some of the productions. They had the Mummers Club, which was a student organization putting on plays and things, and I sang in that for a couple of years. I sang in the Gilbert and Sullivan GNS players from Oberlin, GNS Rudigor. I was Sir Roderick Murgatroyd. I also sang in the tender land of
Copeland.
Aaron Copeland, yeah. I was Grandpa Moss. My background was very much voice, okay, vocal. And so I can say that my orientation as a composer and as a musician basically is vocal. Mm-hmm. Whatever I'm writing, it's still vocal. And the basic book, which was the early Italian arias and art songs, G. Schirmer publication, starting with Caro Mio Ben. Okay. That's my basis for building a career. Okay. Yeah. And so when I wanted to study composition, I started with Herbert Elwell and then Joseph Wood. Both of them encouraged me to go for it. They saw they said I had a talent to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there a particular experience that made you want to start composing, or that pushed you more in the direction of composing?
Well, I just wanted to try it out. When I was playing my little piano music, there was at the end of the book there was blank staves, and I remember writing out little notes, and so then I started imitating my little Mozart things and Czerny exercises. I started writing those down, and it was fun, and then I started arranging some things, some popular tunes and things. So I think that was the beginning of it, just the experience of writing down and then hearing it performed. It was kind of exciting for me. So I think that was basic. But Wood and Elwell was the basis. You know, they taught me more than any other composers I studied with at Oberlin. In other words, any place. You know. So that's
And that makes so much sense to hear about your vocal background and how that informed your compositions, because reflecting on the piece for viola and piano being played on this performance, The Ecstasy of Love,
it feels so vocal to me, and that's certainly one of the challenges as an instrumentalist, is to make the vocal line feel as vocal as possible. But that's a really, I think, a great aspect to your style of composition, and, you know, and something that I really appreciate and that I really like in your music. You know, I actually first came across it because I was literally sitting, this is my office at work, and I was sitting at this desk and I just Googled works for viola and piano by composers from Cleveland because I was curious. Actually, I'm pretty certain I was looking for music by African-American composers from Cleveland. And your work came up and I had a look at it, and that was that. And that was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So
Okay.
I'm glad it was able to actually happen, that I get to play it. And it was amazing to also meet you last year and get to play it for you too. That was really special.
Oh yeah. But I appreciate you playing it, and you did a marvelous job.
Thank you very much. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and just talk about a topic that's been present in a lot of conversations recently, for sure. You know, there's been a lot of talk about what it means to be a Black composer, to be an African-American composer. And for some people, that phrase has a lot of meaning. For others, perhaps less so. And it's quite personal how we relate to this concept of being an African-American artist in general. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on the use of this label and how this may or may not apply to you.
Well, when I went to the church, Antioch Baptist Church, we sang a lot of spirituals, you know, in the choir, and it was a good choir, very well conducted and rich tones from the heart, heartfelt singing, and I learned my spiritual quality from those, you know, from Antioch, and that stuck with me. And when I was looking for text to set to music, the poems of Langston Hughes, Clarissa Scott Delaney, all of those, they touched me. One thing about them, they were relatively simple in construction, short lines, short phrases, not too long, and also very communicative, you know, simple, communicative, and the text. Some of them used dialect, and I incorporated, I set the dialect to music. And then when I had an opportunity to write a piece for the stage, a friend of mine introduced me to his friend who was a teacher in Brooklyn College, and he had this idea for a musical drama, and it was Blake was the subject of Martin Delaney's novel, and it dealt with the antebellum period, and that touched a bell. I mean, it touched me, and so I wrote it is an opera, 4 acts. Took me 4 years. So that's so I'm very much into ethnicity in that sense, you know. You know, so
Okay.
what can I say?
Thanks a lot for coming and spending time and
Oh, my pleasure.
comments on your music. Do you have anything else you'd like to say, or things you think it's important for the audience to know when listening to your music?
Well, I think you hit it on the head, that based upon my experiences in the voice, that carried over into my writing of instrumental music, and orchestral too, as a matter of fact. I'm always looking for a pretty tune, and unashamedly, you know, I went through the whole period where everyone was going for the avant-garde things, you know. It was an interesting experience, you know, but I was not keen toward that end. It wasn't sincere enough. So I just stuck with kept it simple.
Yeah. Well, this has been really great. Thanks a lot for coming and spending time with us.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure, really.
You're welcome. I'm really glad that your music has been experiencing a resurgence lately. I know you've been getting a lot more press and attention in terms of interviews like this. So I really hope that continues.
Oh, thank you much. Yeah, yeah. I do have a website, hbesttheadams.com, that one could keep up with what's happening.
And your music is available via ACA, American Composers Alliance. Is that correct?
Yes, American Composers Alliance. Right.
charm.